Welcome, everyone, to episode 4 of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what is happening?
What's going on, everybody?
So, Gibby, we're taping on a Friday night. We both had a long work day.
We did.
But we're in the studio recording, and that's the way to do it.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Love it.
So, I got to give a shout out to our latest Patreon supporter, Sarah Beth. Sarah Beth, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sarah Beth.
For anyone that would like to support the show on Patreon, you can do so by going to patreon.com/truecrimeallthetime. We started adding some bloopers recently and some other cutting room floor stuff. But another great way to support the show, doesn't cost you a dime. If you like us, go out and give us a nice rating on iTunes. That helps out a lot. And especially, tell your friends that are into true crime about the show. Word of mouth is, that's like gold. And it doesn't cost you anything. All right, Gibbs, we got to get into this Natalee Holloway case.
Right.
I remember this one well.
Oh, I think a lot of people will remember. It was a really big case, right?
It was. And
it was on every media.
Yeah, I was going to say the media coverage for this case was insane.
Right.
It grabbed the nation, like some of the other cases we've done, but for an unsolved case, this one really garnered a lot of attention. So you've got a young girl,
yes,
that's just graduated high school. She goes missing on foreign soil. You've got a bunch of different mysterious suspects who are saying all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
And you've got Natalee's parents who are doing everything in their power to try to find their daughter. So you've got all these elements that are just ripe for the Nancy Graces and the Fox News, the HLN, CNN.
Right.
I mean, it was big. So we got to start with a little background of Natalee. Natalee Ann Holloway was born on October 21st, 1986 in Clinton, Mississippi. She was the first of 2 children born to David and Beth Holloway. Now, David and Beth would divorce in 1993, and Natalee and her younger brother, Matthew, they would be raised by their mother, Beth. In 2000, Beth would marry George Twitty, as they called him Jug. Not sure why, but they called him Jug. So George was a prominent Alabama businessman. He had some money, Gibbs.
Yeah.
And the family moved to Mountain Brook, Alabama.
Pretty nice area.
Very nice area. So Natalee would graduate from Mountain Brook High School with honors. She was a member of the National Honor Society. She was on the dance squad. She participated in just a lot of different, school activities.
Yeah, very intelligent young woman.
Yeah, she was intelligent because she was scheduled to go to the University of Alabama.
Full scholarship.
On a full scholarship.
Yeah.
So
what was she? She was going to major in pre-med, right?
Pre-med, yeah. So she had the world, basically in the palm of her hand.
Right.
She was going to do, some amazing things. At the time of her disappearance, which obviously was what this case is about, her biological father, Dave, he was an insurance agent for State Farm back in Mississippi, and her mom, Beth, was employed in the same school system district that Natalee went to.
Okay.
So that's kind of the background on Natalee. And then we really just got to jump right into her disappearance.
Jump into their senior trip.
Yeah.
What a nice senior trip, by the way.
Yeah, I didn't have anything like that.
No.
I went to Panama City, Florida one year, but
yeah, this is different.
This is Aruba
Right.
we're talking about. So we're talking, so Thursday, May 26, 2005, Natalee and 100 and some,
Right.
over 100 of her fellow graduates, they arrive in Aruba for a 5-day graduation trip. Now, The teenagers were accompanied by some chaperones.
Yeah, like a half a dozen or something.
Yeah, there was 6, 7, 8
Not a lot for
120
some
whatever it was.
kids. Yeah,
But they did have chaperones.
right.
And apparently it was said that the chaperones would meet with the students each day to ensure that everything was going okay. But they weren't there to keep tabs on every person every second of the day.
Yeah,
And it would have been impossible given
the
small number of chaperones
Right.
versus the number of students.
and it wasn't really an official school trip anyway. This was
Yeah.
stuff that clearly the parents signed off on letting their kids
Put it all together.
go. Yeah, yeah. This was the next step of being kind of independent before you go off to college.
Yeah, according to student reports that would come out afterwards, there was a lot of heavy drinking, a lot of partying, which, you would expect on,
Yeah,
can't say I didn't do,
people not in the same room every night.
yeah, I can't say I didn't do a lot of that
Right.
myself at that age.
Probably sound like a lot like your spring breaks.
Yeah, I'm assuming it was a lot like that.
Yeah.
It got so crazy that I read that the Holiday Inn that they stayed at had already told them that, hey, don't come back here next year. You're not
Right.
welcome.
Right.
It must have been a pretty crazy scene.
Pretty wild.
But anytime you have 120 whatever,
It's going to be disruptive.
it's going to be very disruptive.
Right.
I think that the drinking theme and the partying theme, you got to stay. You have to talk about that because it's central.
Absolutely, you have to talk about it because, there was accounts that Natalee was seen drinking morning, noon, night. This kind of plays into the whole story.
It does, and obviously we're not bashing her at all.
Absolutely
but
not.
These are accounts from fellow classmates that said, she would wake up and have a couple cocktails and would drink sometimes so much at night that she never made it to breakfast. I mean, those are the kind of stories that came out afterwards. But she was there. She was having fun, and she wasn't the only one.
I think they basically said that most of the kids were drinking in excess, right?
Yes.
And
Right.
and kind of what you expect from this type of trip from everything we've heard and read about.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. So Natalee and several friends were out drinking, and this is the last night of the trip. And they meet a Dutch individual by the name of Joran Vandersloot. And Joran is going to be central to this whole episode. I mean, this whole case, I don't want to say the whole thing revolves around him, but he's a central figure in almost everything we're going to talk about.
Absolutely.
So Joran was a student.
Yeah, 17.
He was on the island living with his family and attending the Aruba International School. Natalee and several of her friends, they would meet him and several of his friends later that night of the Monday the 30th. As we said, that's the last night of the trip. And they met at a bar called Carlos and Charlie's.
Yeah, been to that bar before.
Have you?
Yeah, absolutely.
There is nowhere you have not been.
There's places I haven't been, but I've been there.
Okay.
They blow the whistle, pour the sangria down your throat.
Have you been to this in Aruba?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Because they tore it down. We're going to talk about that.
I don't know about it, but I've been to Aruba and I've
Okay.
been to Carlos and Charlie's
You must have been back in the day.
back in the day.
Oh.
It's been a long time. Long time. Also stopped at Barbados on the way.
We learn something every episode
Yeah.
about Gibby.
Yeah.
So this is late at night. It's 1:30 in the morning. They're drinking with Joran and his friends, and they leave with them. Now, his friends are two brothers.
Right.
Kalpo brothers.
Yeah. Deepak and
Satish.
Satish.
So they leave with them, and this is where the story goes awry because Natalee's never seen again.
No.
And everything you read pretty much indicates that the last time she's seen alive is with these three individuals riding in Deepak Kalpo's silver Honda. So Natalee had been scheduled to fly home later that day. Remember, we're talking about 1:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
She's supposed to get up and hop on a flight to go home. She never makes that flight.
No. And they even say her luggage is packed and her passport's actually in her room, right? Her passport's not on her. Her passport's back at her hotel room.
Right.
So there's her passport, her ticket, and her packed suitcase.
Right. So she must have packed her luggage
Night before?
before she went out.
Yeah.
Because she knew she was going out. She probably didn't want to do it when she got up that next morning.
Right.
She was going to be probably a little hungover.
Just wear what she had on?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's important, right? It's not like, I think that rules out the fact that something happened to her on the way to the hotel, on the way to the airport, because she would have taken all that stuff. She would have had her passport.
Right. So now the window closes, right?
Yep. The window of time closes from 1:30 to
6 in the morning, I would think.
whatever time she probably would have been scheduled to get up. And
Right.
I don't know what time her flight was scheduled to leave. But none of her classmates knew where she was. And it's at this point that one of the chaperones calls up Natalee's mother, back in Alabama, and says that Natalee's missing. So Natalee's mother, Beth, immediately calls 911. She calls her husband, George, and then she calls the FBI. So
Right.
she was not messing around.
No, she didn't play around at all.
To further that fact, she was on a plane to Aruba by 5 p.m.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't mess around. Her husband
Not one bit.
used his business connections, got a private jet.
Yep.
Right. And they boarded it. And then within 3-4 hours, they were in Aruba
Yeah. Now they had
that day.
some means that most people don't have,
Yeah.
but they used them
Wealthy.
and they got to Aruba quickly. Now, in the meantime, the Aruban authorities are doing some searches. They're trying to find Natalee all throughout the island. They're searching some of the surrounding waters, but they're not finding her. Let's talk about the early investigation. One thing that I think is very interesting, it's really within hours of Beth and George landing in Aruba that they're able to give police the name of Joran Vandersloot.
Yeah.
I mean, they know his name very quickly.
So they find this out before the police even find it out.
So Beth would state that Joran's full name was given to her by the manager at the Holiday Inn.
Okay. So she gets that information and she provides it to the police. Why didn't the police find this out yet? Or they weren't taking it as probably as severe as Beth was at that point.
Well, I think we'll talk about that, right? Because that comes into play a lot.
Right.
What did the Aruban police do?
Sense of urgencies.
Yeah, what was their sense of urgencies? They took a lot of flack, and we're definitely gonna talk about that.
And we got to remember their methods, as far as criminology versus the U.S., is going to be different.
Oh,
On
definitely.
how you pursue things and people's rights and so forth.
And that does, that plays out as the story unfolds.
Right.
We're not in the United States.
No, and
for sure.
And that's where it gets even trickier.
So the next thing to happen is that the Twitties, that's George and Beth,
Right.
because obviously she's remarried to George Twitty. Beth
Of course.
is. But they go, and they've got some friends with them as well. So they go with their friends and 2 policemen to Vandersloot's house,
All right.
which is to me a little strange. For the person to go with the police seems a little strange. Obviously, they're looking for Natalee. They already believe that Vandersloot is the last person, or one of the last people to have seen her. Joran, talking to police, he initially denied that he even knew who Natalee was
Sure.
or had any idea or had been with her or
Plays
anything
dumb.
like that.
Yeah.
Then he tells the police a story. And Deepak Kalpo, which we know was one of the people that was last seen with allegedly last seen with Natalee, is there at Vandersloot's house, happens to be there, and he backs up this story. And the story is that they were with Natalee the night before. They had driven Natalee to the California Lighthouse area of this place that's called Arashi Beach, because, as they said, Natalee wanted to see sharks.
So it's nighttime.
Which seems strange to me.
That they're going to go to this place at nighttime to try to see sharks before she goes back to her hotel.
Which they claim they dropped her off at 2 a.m.
All right, so she's dropped off at 2 o'clock, according to them.
Yeah, but that timing to me seems strange, because we already know that she's seen leaving the bar at 1:30. They're dropping her off at 2.
That's a fast trip.
I don't know how far this California Lighthouse is. Now, we're on an island.
Yeah,
so
it's not very... The distance is not...
It's not a big island.
But still, to get in a car,
to go
get
there,
get out, where you walking right to the edge and going,
"Oh, there's a shark.
Let's go."
Yeah. Plus, the chance you're going to see a shark at 2 a.m.
Don't think you will.
That's pretty remote, I would think.
Right.
So we've got that story, and then he goes on to say, Jorn does, that Natalee falls down. She's so drunk, as she's getting out of the car, he tries to help her, but she tells him to get off of her, and they drive away. But as they're driving away, they see that she's approached by a dark man in a black shirt, and they describe it as looking like one of the security guards.
Sure. So we know at this point there are about a few hundred volunteers scouring the island, trying to help locate her.
Yeah, and these are people from both Aruba and the U.S.
Right, kind of a joint effort.
Volunteers.
And I remember them talking about this on the newscast, that the government, the Peruvian government, did allow the civil servants to have the day off to go out there and help as well.
You have to give them credit, right? The government is trying to do their very best.
Yeah.
Or at least they're putting that foot forward.
I mean, you got the Dutch Marine out there helping. You got the local Aruban banks, raising money to help the search. So I mean, everybody's, like you said, they're putting their best foot forward, trying to find this young lady.
Yeah, and it's so strange that they would come under fire later, but it seems like from everything you read in the beginning that they're doing nothing but their very best to try to locate her.
Yeah, they're cooperating and trying to make things happen at that time.
So the first reports, Gibby, that come out, they're indicating that Natalee did not appear on any surveillance camera footage from her hotel. I guess from the hotel lobby during the course of that night. And, Beth is a very central figure.
She is.
I mean,
she's very involved.
Very involved.
Yeah.
If you remember, she was on the news a lot. And so you really have what I would call two central figures. You have Beth Holloway, Twitty, and you have Joran Vandersloot. To me, those are the two central figures in this story. Now, Beth made varying statements. She made some statements about whether the cameras were actually working that night. I think at one point she said they weren't. At another point, she might have said they were. The police commissioner said, I guess it didn't matter because Natalee could have got to her room without going through the lobby.
Yeah, there was more than one way to get to the room. Yeah. So if they had video and she wasn't on it, it wouldn't matter anyway.
Yeah. Right? I think they were trying to say that the fact that she wasn't on the video didn't necessarily mean that she didn't somehow make it back to her room. But I think we know she didn't make it back to her room, or at least, that's the thought. So they're searching for evidence in this case. And, by all accounts, it was very extensive. And it led to some false leads, though. You know, one piece of evidence they had was a possible blood sample that was taken from
Deepak's car.
Deepak's car.
Yeah.
It turned out to not even be blood at all.
No, it was just false hopes there.
Yeah, I think they were excited about that, but it turned out to not be anything. You know, I think we have to talk about the involvement of the American government and American law enforcement. You know, it was pretty extensive.
It was.
For this kind of case. You and I talked in a previous case, and now I can't remember which one it was, on our regular podcast, True Crime All the Time, about what they call missing white girl syndrome.
Exactly.
And that is going to come up, that comes up again in this case, with a lot of people saying that the only reason why, A, there was so much media coverage is because this was a wealthy white girl.
Yep.
And B, the amount of support, volunteers, government, U.S. government. The only reason why there was so much involvement was, again, because this was a wealthy white girl. And I don't know how much credence there is to that, but in a couple of these cases that we've talked about, there's a lot of information and there's a lot of examples to back it up.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of chatter on this.
Yeah. I mean, you can search that, missing white girl syndrome, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
And if you do, you will find hundreds of examples of African American women in all kinds of different situations. And you'll probably find one similar to a lot of these things that we talk about.
Right.
And it'll be pointed out that it's handled in a much different way. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'll leave it up to the listeners to do that.
I think because her mom and stepdad were pretty affluent, and had political ties. I think that drove this one more than people realize.
I think it did.
But I also think, you have the other things in play as well. But
yeah,
to get that level of cooperation through the United States government to the point that Condoleezza Rice gets involved.
Yeah,
I mean, that's pretty huge. It's not the ambassador. This is Condoleezza Rice,
Secretary of State.
Yeah,
she's actually in constant contact with the Aruban authorities.
Yeah. That's pretty huge.
Right. So you've got some connections. But anyway, like I said, I don't bring it up to start some big war.
No.
But I think it's important for people,
But that perception's out there.
That perception is out there.
Yeah.
And it might be more than perception.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll leave that up to I'll leave that up to the audience.
Right.
To figure out how they want to weigh in on it. But
there's
it's definitely out there.
There's definitely a lot of examples to point in that direction. Gibby, I mean, it's not very long before some initial questioning and even detainment happens with suspects. So on June 5th, the police detain Nick John and Abraham Jones, who were security guards or former security guards.
Right.
I don't know if they were still active or
I think they're at the hotel across the street.
Yeah, at a nearby hotel, which I think at that point was closed for renovation, and maybe that's why they were former security guards. I don't know. But they detained them on suspicion of murder and kidnapping of Natalee Holloway.
Yeah.
And officially, the reasons for these arrests have never been disclosed. But I think you have to point to the statements of Joran Vandersloot saying that the last time he saw Natalee, she was being approached by, and I think he said one. I thought he said one man.
Yeah, and he did. He said
wearing all black,
one dark man,
looked
dark
like
male,
looked like a security guard.
Right.
So somehow that threw suspicion onto these two individuals. There was more to it, right?
They had a little background.
They had a history of allegedly cruising hotels to pick up women, and one of them had some type of prior incident and was on law enforcement's radar. They were never charged, and they were released on the 13th. Now, that's 8 days.
Yeah. But that's part of this. Another side of this case is that the detention time that they could hold people was pretty expansive.
Much different than it is in the U.S.
Absolutely.
Right? You have a short window of time to hold somebody.
Yeah.
And
Or
if
you got to
don't
turn them loose.
If you don't charge them, yeah, you got to turn them
But
loose.
down here, in Aruba, over here in Aruba, it's a little different.
Right. So that's the first people that they thought were suspects, but they were released, were never charged. On June 9th, which is during that period, right? It's
right.
Basically halfway between the time that the two former security guards were arrested and released. Joran Vandersloot and both of the Kalpoe brothers are arrested.
Yeah.
On suspicion of kidnapping and murdering Natalee Holloway. So basically, as of June 9th, they've got 5 people arrested.
Yeah, or detained.
Yeah, however you want to look at it.
Right.
I think they were arrested but never
charged.
The first people were arrested but never charged,
right?
Technically. And like you said, the law down there allows for arrest basically just on suspicion.
Yeah.
From investigators. They can hold suspects for a much longer time. There's an increase in the burden of evidence as that time goes on. So apparently there's a review that happens every so often that the person is being detained.
And you have to have sufficient amount of proof
and if you don't, then they have to be let
go.
Cut
them loose. Yeah.
Yeah.
I read that the reason that they, arrested those 3 is because immediately after being notified and were aware of Vandersloot and the brothers, they started tracking them, right? They started wiretapping them. They started doing surveillance on them, and that was their justification on picking them up and bringing them to the jail.
Yeah, it was, but I never got that the monitoring of their email or the wiretaps, did it produce anything?
Well, that's the weird thing about this whole case, right? There's so much information that's not told that, they say they did these things, but they never say this is what we found.
Right.
And then you have things like this next statement that happened on, June 11th by the spokesperson for the Aruban Minister of Justice, where he comes out and he says that, Natalee's body, the location is known and she's dead.
Yeah, he comes out and basically says she's dead.
And he's a high-ranking person, right? But then he retracts that. So how do you feel about that, especially if you're the parents?
Yeah, so
you're saying you know where the body is and she's dead, but then you're telling me, oh no, I misspoke?
So his statement of retraction basically said that he had received some misinformation. That's some pretty serious misinformation.
Yeah.
If you're going to go out and say, yeah, we know she's dead and we know where her body is.
That level, you confirm everything before you open your mouth.
Yeah, one thing that was interesting that I wanted to talk about. So, they arrest Vandersloot and the Kalpoe brothers. And it was said by the police that it was pressure from the Holloway family that caused them to stop their surveillance prematurely and to detain the 3 suspects. So that might have answered our questions about what did they get from the wiretapping and the emails and the surveillance. I think they're saying we didn't get anything yet because we wanted to keep it going, but there was so much pressure from Beth Holloway and other outside forces that we had to arrest them.
But why would they pressure if they didn't think that they had some solid information too?
Again,
but we don't know.
Right. Again, I think that's where a lot of the scrutiny on the government down there comes in. I think they did some good things, but I think they also did some things that raised a lot of eyebrows. Just like what you said, this David Cruz guy comes out and says that she's dead.
It's kind of reminds me of like a Barney Fife kind of, right? I mean, Aruba's not a huge country. It's not a big island. So it's small.
Yeah.
So it's almost like getting this happening in some small U.S. town where it's the good old boys and
or just police officers that aren't
versed in this type of
very well
procedures.
trained. It's
Yeah.
not something they go through a lot. I don't know.
Yeah, if they don't have this happen a lot, right? I mean, it's hard for them to do the job that needs to be done versus calling in this, somebody on the state level.
So the police chief would come out and say that one of the detained young men, which has to be either Yoran, Satish, or Deepak, admitted that something very bad happened to Natalee after the suspects took her to the beach, and that the suspect was leading police to the scene. So again, he's coming out and saying that they're really close to finding out what happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty important information that he just said.
Almost a confessional type
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
Now, the very next morning, though, there's a spokeswoman for the prosecution. She refused to confirm or deny any of that, simply stating that the investigation was at a very crucial, important moment.
Yeah. So
So
again,
those are two very different,
talking about mishandling of communication.
and mixed
Again.
signals. So we got to go up to Friday, June 17th,
Yeah.
because now a sixth person is arrested, and it's a disc jockey named Steve Crows. The media was told that Crows was detained based on information from one of the other three detainees.
Okay.
So again, we're going to get into this down, but they're telling all kinds of crazy stories.
Yeah, and I think part of all this, and it gets even crazier as we go down.
Oh,
right?
sure.
I think that's part of the thing. Have the police looking everywhere else but where they need to look, right? Keep throwing out bizarre stuff. Get them chasing this way. Throw them down that rabbit hole.
On the June 22nd, the police would detain Joran Vandersloot's father for questioning, and they would arrest him. So that's what, 6, 7, that's the seventh person
That is.
so far that's been arrested. Now, both his father, Paulus, and Crows, the disc jockey, they would be released on the 26th. So
Right.
his father was kept for 4 days, and this disc jockey was kept for 9 days. That's a long time.
It
9
is.
days.
That is a long time to be detained.
If you're comparing to the U.S. system. And it was really during this time, as we talked about, that the suspects that they had were telling all kinds of crazy stories. They were naming different people, which is why certain people got brought in and
Right.
questioned and arrested.
Well, and they're working the suspects against each other at this point, too.
Yeah. All three suspects, though, indicated that Joran Vandersloot and Natalee Holloway were dropped off at the Marriott Hotel Beach. Vandersloot, he did state he did not harm Holloway. He left her there on the beach.
So went from looking at the sharks, his first story, looking at the sharks at between 1:30 and 2 and bringing her back. Now he's saying that they came back to the Marriott Beach area and hung out on the beach, and then he got up and left her there.
Right. So that's at least two versions.
Right. He said, "See you later, beautiful blonde," and left.
And then you've got a third version that comes out where Vandersloot says he was dropped off at home and Holloway was driven off by the Calpo brothers.
Okay.
So he's not even involved anymore at this version. Now on Monday, July 4th, so again, now they've been detained for quite a while. There's some hearings before a judge, and both Calpo brothers are released, but Vandersloot was not, and he would be kept for another 60 days.
Okay.
That is a long
That's
time
a long time.
not to be technically charged
Right.
with anything, right? Were they charged? I think at this point they're just arrested.
Yeah, they're just arrested.
They haven't been charged with
Right.
anything.
So he's being detained for another 60 days.
Yeah. Now, the release of the Calpo brothers does not make Beth Holloway happy. And I want to play some audio from her.
It is now that I ask the world to help me. 2 suspects were released yesterday who were involved in a violent crime against my daughter. These criminals are not only allowed to walk freely among the tourists and citizens of Aruba, but there are no limits where they may choose to travel. I am asking all mothers and fathers in all nations to hear my plea. I implore you, do not allow these 2 suspects, the Calpo brothers, to enter your country until this case is solved. Do not allow these criminals to walk among your citizens. Help me by not allowing these 2 to get away with this crime. It is my greatest fear today that the Calpo brothers will leave Aruba. I'm asking the Aruban officials to notify the United States State Department in the event these suspects try to leave this island. I'm asking all nations not to offer them a safe haven. I'm asking this in the name of my beautiful, intelligent, and outstanding daughter, who I haven't seen for 36 days and for whom I will continue to search until I find her. Thank you all so much.
Obviously, Gibby, she's in serious pain.
Absolutely.
But what happens as a result of that press conference is it pisses off a lot of the people in Aruba.
Yeah.
And there are demonstrations, and a lot of people turn against her for the comments that she's made, basically saying that the Calpo brothers are innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
And she's saying that they're guilty.
Right.
When they haven't been charged and convicted. And that leads to this.
I would like to apologize to the Aruban people and the Aruban authorities if I or my family offended you in any way. It was never my intention to do so. And as the Aruban people, they have been extremely kind and generous and especially supportive of myself and my family during this tragedy. I realize that the Aruban legal system abides by the presumption of innocence, and I want to reassure everyone that I do respect the Aruban legal system. The statements I made on July 5th were fueled by despair and frustration because of still not knowing where my daughter is. I think everyone can sympathize with that. Furthermore, I would also like to clarify a false rumor that has been circulating in the press. I never asked or demanded from the Aruban government to pay an amount of United States dollars, $200,000 to the Texas EquiSearch team. Never.
Nada disso eu quase seguro. No, a mim não sabe mesmo dizer. Because I know what I have explained to the family, as I just did, that with or without pressure, our legal system entails that the investigation will continue regardless if there is pressure from outside or not. They're an independent investigation as is embedded in our legal system, and it will continue.
You know, she kind of had to, or was forced to give that press conference because, you know, people were turning against her.
Right. Not a retraction, but just kind of soften the blow.
Yeah, soften clarification maybe. So all this time, you know, the people are detained, they're questioned, and they're let go, but they're still looking for Natalee.
Sure. I mean, now at this point, they've got, a handful of fighter jets. I call them fighter jets. They're F-16s. So
aircraft, but they got infrared sensors.
Yeah, they're up there. They're looking at the topography, right, and compare them to previous satellite photos to determine if they can. I guess you can tell if there's a divot or a raised area.
I think we talked about it in the last episode on West Mesa.
West Mesa,
yeah.
Right?
They're looking for a change in the ground,
right,
that would indicate a grave.
Right,
basically is what they were doing. And then you've got a couple of people that come forward in the late July.
Oh, the gardener.
Yeah, you got the gardener who basically says that Joran Vandersloot was attempting to hide his face as he was driving into the racket club. He had both Calpo brothers with him. And this was on the morning of May 30th between 2:30 and 3 o'clock.
So it's later in the evening now, right? We went from 2 to 2:30. Now we're pushing 3. So none of the stories match. But again, it's at nighttime. But he's trying to hide his face when he pulls in.
Yeah. Now, as a result of him saying that, they had to drain a pond at this Aruba Racket Club, which was close to the Marriott Hotel Beach, which was part of one of his stories, right? See, it's getting so convoluted because he's telling so many different stories, and it'll just get worse.
Oh yeah,
It gets much worse.
yeah, absolutely.
And then you've got so you got the gardener, and then you've got the jogger, who claimed to have seen men burying a blonde-haired woman in a landfill during the afternoon of May 30th.
Which is okay. So she's got that night, right? And when I say that night, it's really that morning,
May 30th,
May
right?
30th, and they're saying
A.M.
in the afternoon, daylight. He's saying he's seen people bury this, a blonde woman.
Yep.
But doesn't report it until now.
Yeah, because this is late July, so
Yeah.
so 2 months. He waits 2 months to report it.
Yeah.
But the police searched this landfill. They searched it actually in the days after Natalee's disappearance for whatever reason. I don't know if they were just tipped or if they thought that was a good place to search.
Right.
But then after they searched it 3 different times after the jogger comes forward, including a search where the FBI brings in cadaver dog. So they hit it hard, and nothing came out of either one of those tips.
So we know at this point that the Holloways offered an award for a safe return, and they take that award, which I guess was originally $200,000, and they make it $1 million with $100,000 reward for any information leading to the location of Natalee. So
$1 million if you can bring her back or lead us to get her back, and $100,000 if you got any information that helps us find her.
yeah,
Now, when they started, the reward was $50,000.
yeah. So it's increased over time.
Yeah, and then I think, like you said, it was at 200, and then it went to $1 million, and then ultimately the reward for just the information about her remains that led to her remains would be raised from 100 to 250. So they're ratcheting up both of these different rewards. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean that Beth and George and her real dad, they're trying everything.
Oh, to the point they even get the FBI government to get the local Reuben police and investigators to bring information that they had, and they fly to Quantico,
Right.
And they sit down with the FBI and they review everything with them at Quantico using, I would assume, the best technology and criminal investigation that you can have.
One of the pieces of evidence that they sent back to Quantico was a piece of duct tape that was found. And apparently it had some strands of blonde hair attached to it that I know they had to have thought was Natalee's.
I think they were hopeful.
They were hopeful. And they tested it not only at Quantico, but also independently at a Dutch lab. The FBI announced that the hair was not Natalee's. So that right there, whoever they were going to tie it to, it didn't matter because...
Yeah, it wasn't useful in this case.
Yeah.
But strange enough, go back to Aruba, right? And on August 26th, they make a rearrest of the brothers. They rearrest Deepak and Satish,
the Kalpoe brothers.
The Kalpoe brothers. They bring in a new suspect. You're going to have to help me out on this name, Mike. Freddie
Aaron Batsi. That's what I'm going with.
Yeah. And I guess he was taking some photographs and having some physical contact with underage girls. So that's what got him pulled into this group.
Well, and I think this, what I read, Gibbs, was that this incident that caused them to look at this Freddie guy allegedly occurred way before the Holloway disappearance. But what tied it all together was that supposedly Joran Vandersloot and both of the Kalpoe brothers were involved in this as well.
Right. So kind of like a track record.
Yeah. So I don't know if they thought, bring in Freddie because maybe he can help us tie everything together.
And just try to pressure the brothers into confessing to something maybe by having all that laid out in front of them and have them back in custody or detention, as they call it there.
Yeah, and I think this was a little unpopular with the Reuben people.
Right.
I think they saw through this as, like you said, an attempt to pressure the Calpo brothers into talking, and ultimately was unsuccessful because, in early September, all 4 people are released by a judge.
So at this point, everybody's out.
Yep. Now, in addition to that, on September 14th, the judge lifted all restrictions for all 4 of these people. So you got Yoren, the 2 Calpo brothers, Freddie, who I'm not even sure was involved in anything other than...
So now they can, I guess, they can travel.
They can go anywhere they want to.
They're free to do what they want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now that, again, that's one of the things that I think Beth Holloway had Twitty had a really big problem with, is the ability for them to just up and leave while this investigation was still going on. So by this time, the news coverage of the Natalee Holloway case had diminished considerably.
Right. Interest is dropping.
Well, do you know why?
I don't know why.
A little thing happened called Hurricane Katrina.
Is that what happened?
August of 2005.
I remember that, though. That's just...
Well, everybody remembers that.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
So August of 2005 is when Hurricane Katrina hit.
Yeah.
So that would have been kind of while a lot of this was going on that we've been talking about. And there was a lot of speculation that this is why they chose when they did to release the 4 suspects, is because the scrutiny wasn't there quite as much as it was before.
Right.
Because Hurricane Katrina, you remember, was so big.
Absolutely.
That almost all media attention, especially in the U.S., shifted
yeah.
to cover that. And that went on for quite a while because if you remember, the aftermath was unbelievable.
It's huge. Yeah. There was so many different stories that came out over the years. I mean, there was an interview where, Vandersloot said that, Holloway wanted to have sex with him and the 2 brothers, but they didn't have a condom, so they didn't do that. And so they left her on the beach, and then he felt bad for leaving her on the beach. But I think that's hard to believe. I think anybody hears that story, I don't think they believe that whatsoever. So even after they talk about him alleging that she wanted to have sex with him, right? We get past that, and then down the road we have someone from the local police again. They give an interview to somebody at CBS, and I think this was around March 25th, 2006. And I think at this point they just want the case to be over because this spokesperson states that they believe that Holloway's dead and that she died from self-consumed alcohol. So, I mean, they're saying there was no wrongdoing, that she did it to herself, and basically that they're over it. They've got over, $3-4 million
well, that's what I was going to say.
Fees.
I think part of that is the fact that they've spent over $3 million on the investigation.
Yeah.
Which, by all accounts, is about 40% of their total budget.
Right.
For the, I guess for the year.
And I just think that the locals have run thin on this, right? The government, and they're all wanting to move on.
All right, Mike. So I think we're up to April 27th, 2007. And this is when about 20 investigators do a search at the Vandersloot family residence in Aruba.
Right.
It's Dutch authorities. They're searching the yard. They're using shovels. They're using these metal rods to kind of push down through the dirt. I think they have a feeling that Natalee was buried there, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's why they did that search. Because what else would they be looking for in the dirt except for her body?
Right. But nothing comes about it.
No, nothing comes up at all. And investigators were never able to tell anybody what prompted the search.
But we know that a few weeks later they go over to the Deepak's house, and they do another search there as well. Again, nothing comes about it. There's nothing significant to add to the case, and so at that point, the searches are over.
All right, Gibbs. So this is how crazy this story gets, right? Because in November of 2007, Joran Vandersloot, Satish, and Deepak Kalpoe are all rearrested.
Yeah.
Again. I mean, their homes had just been searched just a few months ago. Now they're rearrested in November, and they're arrested on what is called suspicion of involvement in manslaughter and causing serious bodily harm that resulted in the death of Natalee Holloway.
But that didn't last very long.
No.
You know, it's like 7-8 days later, the judge says, you got to release Satish and Deepak. So, you know, they're released.
Joran was released on December 7th due to lack of evidence. And then on December 18th, the prosecutor officially declared the case closed and that no charges would be filed due to lack of evidence.
Yeah, which means because they didn't have a body.
Yeah.
If you don't have the body, it's hard to prove. It's hard to prove most things in this type of case.
But the interest in the three of them continues.
Oh, yeah, this keeps going, man.
I mean, there is at one point allegations that one of the three of them in a chat room had stated that Holloway was dead. So then, Gib, we got to move to January of 2008. And this is where, you know, again, things get interesting because you got a Dutch crime reporter who claims to the world that he solved the Natalee Holloway case.
Right.
And he's actually getting ready to air on Dutch television secret recordings of Joran Vandersloot confessing to the crime. And basically what happened was he had wired a vehicle for sound, and I'm not sure how this part happened, but he got this guy named Patrick van der Fem, who was a Dutch businessman and ex-convict, who had apparently gained the confidence of Joran Vandersloot.
So they're kind of like buddies now.
Yeah. And they got into the car together, which was wired. Joran is smoking marijuana, and he's talking, and basically he's saying that he was with Natalee Holloway, and she began convulsively shaking, became unresponsive. He goes on to state that, you know, he attempted to revive her, and then he called a friend, and this friend told Vandersloot to go home and that he would dispose of the body. So this is what he's saying. You know, the tape is in Dutch, so I can't play it, but
right.
People can go on YouTube and it's subtitled, so you can basically see what he's saying.
So I'm guessing when the authorities hear this tape, does it spark some interest?
Well, I think what it does is it causes the prosecutor in Aruba to reopen the case.
Okay. So he meets with the investigators around February 8th, and then he basically tells them, hey, what was on the tape is not true.
Yeah, I think he said that he was just telling this guy a story.
And under the influence of the marijuana.
Yeah, smoking weed. And I'm just telling this guy a story to sound cool, or I don't know if that's exactly the words he used, but either way, at this point, he still maintains that he was with Natalee, but he left her on the beach.
Yeah.
Right? And he sticks with that. And nothing else comes of it. But it's another instance of him telling another story.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
his
another
stories,
version of what happened.
Yeah, his stories are just piling up, and they don't stop.
Right.
Because in November, Joran decides to do an interview with Fox News in which he has a news story.
Okay.
And this story, he's saying that he sold Natalee Holloway into sexual slavery.
So he kidnaps her and ships her 10 miles across the ocean to Venezuela?
Yeah, well, let's hear what he has to say.
Okay.
Not because she was interested in me, I guess. Because she was coming up she was coming up to come dance with me, and that's when I was remembering this guy, and he, like, I think it was more than 2 days before that even, he gave me his card with his phone number on it, and yeah. I thought he was just like maybe looking to have a good time, go out, I don't know. I did not know 100% whatever his intentions were. I still don't know right now what his exact intentions were. So he asks me first, let's go to your house. When I go to your house, I want to see your house. I'm like, no, let's go back to your hotel. It was right next to the other where we had to be anyway. Thought we could go see how it is there, but she didn't want to go back to her own hotel. So then that's when I told the guys just drop us off by the Marriott. And said that, yeah, no, I'm in the car now, and I'm with the girl, and I'm with 2 friends, and what are you doing? And he's like, yeah, I'm awake. And then he's like, okay, can you be there and there in an hour? And I'm going to have someone there. And I'm like, okay. To give you your money, is what he said. And I'm like, okay. Then I got out, stepped out of the car. She was with me. Went to the beach with her, and we were just making out. We never did anything else. And then at first I didn't see anyone there. I didn't know anything. And I was like, okay, whatever, it's not going to happen. Then I saw a guy, and he came, and he just handed me a bag, grabbed the girl by the arm, and he went to the boat that he had in the water. Then I went home. I called Deepak up, and he sent Satish to come pick me up. One night I paid, other night he paid, and I gave them both $1,000. I didn't tell them how much I was getting for it first. Afterwards, I told them.
So my question is, all along he's claimed that he didn't kill her, he didn't hurt her, but now he's going to switch a story that implicates him in orchestrating her sale in a sex ring, slavery. I just don't get it.
Either one of these 3, if you were being held and knew the severity of what could happen to you, why wouldn't you, if that's really what happened, why wouldn't you just come out and say, hey, he sold her to some sex trade, human trafficking group. She's probably over in Venezuela, and he paid us $1,000 each. So why wouldn't the brothers come clean on that? Because at that point, the theory is that she's alive, right? You're not looking at murder.
And they went through a lot. If you think about it, the Calpo brothers were arrested multiple times, had their houses searched. If that's what really went down, their part in it would have been very minuscule.
Yeah.
Driving the car, maybe.
So
they would have rolled.
Yeah, I think
that's
so.
my thought.
I think if that was a true version of what happened, that would have came out earlier.
Yeah, I just think he is a compulsive liar.
Yeah.
And he's just inventing stories. Because obviously that interview was much, much longer. I cut it down to just what I thought was the most important part, which was him admitting that, he played a role in this sale, I guess you would call it. All right, Gibb. So we got to talk about the next crazy twist in this whole Natalee Holloway case. And obviously it involves Joran van der Sloot because everything seems to.
Right.
And this is really one of the craziest chapters in this case.
Yeah, this really, just gets more twisted.
Yeah, so this happens in March of 2009. They basically have gone through several years of not much happening. Nobody's getting any answers. There's no new leads. And van der Sloot reaches out to Natalee's family, I think through their attorney. And he says that he knows the location of Natalee's body. And he's willing to cooperate with them and lead them to Natalee's body. But he wants $250,000 in exchange for this information. So they actually give him an advance of 10%. They give him $25,000 because they're so desperate at this point to find out what happened to their daughter.
Sure, makes sense.
And unfortunately, everything that he says turns out to be fake, which I believe everything he said up to this point is fake as well.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't blame them for trying anything and everything, but you know, at some point you got to realize this guy just can't be trusted at all.
Twisted.
Yeah, it's very twisted. Now he's indicted for wire fraud and extortion, but you know, it doesn't matter because he never gets the chance to answer for what he did. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute.
But why was that, Mike?
Yeah, but first I got a clip of Vandersloot.
For everything that happened since 2005, all the things said in the media, everything I feel guilty for. Yeah, I was doing a lot of things that I shouldn't have been doing, and mostly only going out all the night and sleeping all the day. I've always been very impulsive. Always been take a action right away and make a decision immediately and not think about what the consequences are. People were paying me to make up stories, and I was really good at making up stories. Everybody keeps coming at you, asking you questions, asking you stuff, and yeah, you don't know something, and finally you start to think, okay, well you if you want something, then I'll tell you whatever you want to hear. Sure. I misused the situation for my own advantage, and I feel bad about that, and if I could change that, I would take it back for sure. I have had 5 years long that people have just been blaming me for something, and yeah, I have a lot of anger built up because of that also. And yeah, at one point I just thought that okay, you know, you keep insisting that you want to give me this money. I've already told a lot of different stories. I'll do it again. And yeah, I know it's very wrong what I did. When I speak to the judge and the time is right, I'm gonna tell the whole truth. Absolutely. It's a whole web of problems, but I created all of them myself. So yeah, I have to deal with it now. Deal with the consequences.
So that was interesting.
Yeah. So did they ever say who paid him to tell these stories? Because that's what he says. He says, you know, at one point he says, you know, I was paid to tell stories.
Yeah, I mean, I know in one, he's talking about this money he got from Natalee's family.
Right.
But I don't know who else he's talking about that's paying him to tell these stories.
Interesting.
What's amazing is, though, he takes the $25,000.
Yeah.
And he goes to Peru. Not sure why, but he decides that the best course of action for him is to go to Peru, and he's over there, he's gambling, he's just, you know, blowing all this money.
Right.
And he meets a woman, 21-year-old business student named Stephanie Ramirez. So what happens to Stephanie is that she's found dead 3 days later after she meets Joran Vandersloot.
Okay.
In a hotel room registered in his name. So unlike Natalee's case, where the evidence is circumstantial, the evidence in this Ramirez case...
Got some physical evidence.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pointing at nobody but Joran Vandersloot. So, number one, they got video footage of Stephanie Ramirez and Joran entering his hotel room together. And then they have him leaving by himself. And it wasn't for 3 days that they found her. In the meantime, he's in Chile. So he's fled to Chile. And they capture him a few days after the discovery of her body. Now, the Chilean authorities, after they find him, they state that what they find on him is money allegedly stolen from the murder victim. But even more damning than that is that apparently Joran had bloody clothing on his person, and that pretty much sealed the deal.
Yeah. DNA.
So they extradite him to Peru, to stand trial for the Ramirez murder. So while Joran is in a Peruvian prison, Beth Holloway, Twitty, Natalee's mom, is able to sneak into the prison with a Dutch film crew.
This is getting interesting.
Yeah. So the Dutch film crew apparently is there to interview him.
Okay.
What Joran doesn't know is that she's coming with him.
Okay. So he just thinks this Dutch crew's coming.
Yes.
He doesn't realize she's going to be the one asking the questions.
And she was able to spend, I think it was about 5 minutes
Okay.
alone with Joran. Well, not alone, because the Dutch film, they were taping it.
Right.
But I want to play some of it because it's very interesting.
When you're looking at spending the rest of your life in prison, you're on, and I know you want to make a plea deal in Peru and in Aruba in the U.S. And I've met with the prosecutors, and I've met with the Flores family. And you're on, I won't do anything until I get some information about Natalee. But it's your life. It's too late for Natalee. It's too late for Stephanie. It's too late for me. But it's not too late for you, Joran, to get your life back. You don't need to lose your life here in prison and be sitting here when you're 60 years of age and insisting to me that you don't know what happened. If it was an accident, tell me. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm here.
I hope you can understand also that it's very hard for me to talk to you. It's really not easy. I'm really doing my best to. And I know you have a very good heart, and I know that for a fact. And I don't know if you would mind just giving me some. I really have been thinking a lot, and just giving me some time to think. And I promise you, even if you give me your address, I will write you. I owe you at least that. I mean, I've made so many bad decisions, and all for the wrong reasons. I hope you know that I'm really very addicted to person, especially to gambling. I mean, that's why I've told so many lies and other stuff just so I have money and so I can go gamble with. That's honestly the truth behind the reasons why I did all those things, how horrible they were. But I promise you, if you give me your address,
Okay, I will. And this is your attorney's number?
That is his phone number.
All right. I don't really understand what this means, but, I think that you might, and I just wanted to get face to face with you. And, I feel like when I go back in time, you're on, 5 years ago, I'm thinking, I felt like you didn't listen to me then, and I wanted to just, tell me what happened, and let me take her home.
It's always been my problem. I've never listened to anyone who's meant well for me. I've always done what I myself wanted or what I myself thought was best. And even after I should have learned from my mistakes, still always the same stuff. Now I've had a lot of time here also now to think and do other stuff. And I really do want to write you. I just need some time to think about what I want to say. And
Okay.
how I want to say it, and I would appreciate it if you'd give me that also.
I will. And I really, so you know why I'm here, is
I do know.
I want to know answers, and I want to know what happened.
So she's trying so hard
Yeah.
to get something out of him. And all he keeps saying is, well, give me your address and I'll write you.
Right. Kind of blowing her off, really.
Yeah. But I think he was surprised by the fact that she showed up. I don't think he was ready for her. But it was amazing. I thought that she was able to get in. And what you can't hear, because I cut it off, was they kind of bust in on him a little bit right there. Realized that she shouldn't be in there and kind of break it up. So Joran van der Sloot pled guilty to murdering Stephanie Ramirez on January 11, 2012. He ended up getting a sentence of 28 years in prison. I don't know what that means in Peru.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't know how many years he has to serve before he...
Right.
Yeah.
So the story that, as I understand it, is that, and you heard him talk about being addicted to gambling.
Yeah.
And I think he blew through that 25,000 pretty quickly.
Yeah, he did.
And I think one of the theories is that he killed Stephanie Ramirez for money.
Mm-hmm.
He robbed her because he had this addiction to gambling. But there was some other stuff that I read that thought that maybe she knew something on him. Either he had told her something or she'd stumbled on to some kind of evidence related to the Natalee Holloway case.
Okay.
And that's why he killed her. I don't know which is which. Yeah. Another rabbit hole like we talk about.
Right.
It only took a couple hours of police interrogation for him to admit to killing Ramirez. His side of the story was that they got in an argument. So the interesting part is, though, apparently he left the hotel. She was in his room. When he came back, he found her going through his laptop. And I think that's the reason why there's speculation that she may have found something on his laptop that had something to do with Natalee's case.
Enraged him, I guess.
And maybe she confronted him. Whatever happened, they got in a big fight and he killed her.
Okay.
The other thing that happened was that apparently he offered to finally reveal the location of Natalee's body in exchange for extradition back to Aruba. But the Peruvian government, they didn't give a shit about it at all.
They said no.
They said they weren't interested.
Yeah. Probably didn't believe him anyway.
Yeah, they probably didn't at this point. But they said they didn't care about anything but keeping him there to serve the time for the murder.
For killing the Peruvian
that
woman.
he had committed there.
Yeah.
So whether he really knew or whether, again, he's just talking as he likes to do. So one day after he was convicted of the Ramirez murder, an Alabama court declared Natalee Holloway legally dead. Pretty sad.
It is.
But we're what, 7 years?
6.5 years, 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, obviously Gibbs, her parents, heartbroken.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They will always be heartbroken.
Well, there's no closure.
They'll never, right now, unless something new comes up. And the problem is, and I don't know how you feel, but to me, Vandersloot's the key.
Yeah.
He's in the middle of all of it, and he's stuck in a jail, and his information is unreliable, even if he knows the truth.
Yeah, you don't, no matter what he tells, and at this point, if he gives a location, would the body even be there?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, you really don't know.
I hope that he writes her, and I hope he tells her what location, and I hope that she's able to go there and dig and actually find the remains so that she gets, and the father gets closure. That's what I hope.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's the only thing that they can hope for. I mean, could she still be alive? She could be. Yeah. If she really was sold into some type of, sex slave ring, technically she could be alive.
Right.
But 7,
Even in human trafficking, I think that the outcome is pretty bleak.
All right, Gibby, so there's so many twists and turns in this case.
There is.
And there's one more that I want to talk about, and it doesn't surface until 2015.
Okay.
So just a couple of years ago, there was a new witness that came forward and basically said that he saw Joran Vandersloot bury Natalee Holloway back in 2005. Now, I know your first question is, why do you wait 10 years to come forward?
Exactly what my question is.
Because I know you. But apparently, he said that she was buried underneath this new fancy hotel. I don't know if it's a Marriott. It's some big hotel in Aruba.
Okay.
That was under construction in 2005. So let's play. I got a little clip of this guy.
I know what happened to Natalee Holloway. I saw that Joran was chasing Natalee into a small building under construction. After 5 minutes, he came out with her in his arms and he slammed the body of Natalee on the floor. And then he made opening in the crawl space and pulled her by the ankles inside of the crawl space. I saw a crime passing for my eyes, but I was also in that moment busy with illegal activities. So I didn't know what to do. If I was making this up, this would be the work of a man who is insane. You know, and I don't consider myself insane.
No, he could be insane. I don't know. But it answers our question.
It does.
Right? Because he was involved in some illegal activities and felt like he couldn't come forward.
Right.
And when I first heard this and I first started reading about it, I was kind of very intrigued that maybe something could come of it. Unfortunately, then as I researched further, I found out that, you know, they did look into this very seriously, and they worked with the, I think it's the Marriott, but they worked with hotel officials to go back and
timeline it.
Yeah, go through the timeline. And at the time that Natalee disappeared, the construction was not to the point that this guy says it was. Like, he talks about buildings and crawl spaces, and they were able to document the fact that it couldn't possibly be true.
So they didn't even look in the crawl space area, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
they figured it wasn't valid.
Yeah. I mean, all I know is they were able to discount him. You and I could sit here and talk for probably another 2 or 3 hours about all the different offshoots of things that happened and theories. But to me, I still go back, and I'm not saying anybody did it, that I know anybody did it.
Right.
But if you were to ask me, I would say Joran Vandersloot and the Kalpoe brothers know something.
I would agree.
Whether they did it or know who did it, they're at the center of all of this. And until one of them, I think, chooses to speak out, the case will never be solved.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, that was the case of Natalee Holloway. You know, it's sad that the family doesn't have the closure that they need. And but, you know, this is one that, you know, down the road could be solved.
Could be.
If the right person steps forward and has legitimate information.
There's 3 people that know.
Yep. All right. So for Mike and Gibby, stay safe and keep your own time ticking.